So bourbon is whiskey, but whiskey isn't bourbon.
Yeah, but all bourbons are whiskey.
Correct, but not all whiskeys are bourbon.
Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Also known as a Lady in the Bourbon on Instagram.
I think it's Huckberry.
No, so it actually, like, the real thing is...
Our little niche is that we just like to drink bourbon and bullshit, you know? That's why the big BS in our logo is we just like
There
to
it
bullshit.
is. Bourbon and bullshit.
Most of the stuff on the shelf I would not recommend for a beginner.
I would say Yellowstone. We don't have the
toasted one?
No. So we don't have the standard straight bourbon Yellowstone.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have it.
No.
That can fall in the parameter of a beginner bourbon, right?
I'd say that's more intermediate, personally.
I think it's one of them line grabbers.
Yeah.
It can fall, but it's all because some of no two people are the same, right?
Right.
So your palate's gonna develop different. Everybody's
changes over time,
right?
for sure.
And it's just like, I don't like mushrooms. You like mushrooms, right? Think different people's palates adjust different ways. So what makes bourbon bourbon? So
you want to know
right?
that you want to
so
know
you have whiskey, right?
Yeah.
And then you have bourbon.
Well,
'cause we're
there's
talking
rules
101
for
stuff,
bourbon, right?
So bourbon is whiskey, but whiskey isn't bourbon.
Yeah, but all bourbons are whiskey.
Correct, but not all
whiskeys
whiskeys
are
are
bourbon.
bourbon. Exactly.
And that's because of the rules that you have to follow. You know, it's got to be at least 51% corn. It's got to be in a charred oak barrel. Single use.
Yep, single-use charred oak barrel. So Dan hit that, right? Only produced in the United States. So only whiskey produced in the United States can be called bourbon.
Correct.
All right?
And it had to be in Kentucky.
Well, so it still is
In the
to
beginning.
get the label Kentucky.
As a Kentucky
Correct.
bourbon or a Kentucky straight
Right.
bourbon. And it has to actually be it has to be distilled and stayed in a warehouse in Kentucky.
Yep.
Then it can be considered a Kentucky bourbon.
Correct.
Otherwise, wherever it is, it's just a straight bourbon
Yep.
or just a bourbon in general.
So the 5 key points, Dan already hit 2, which was mash bill has to start with 51% corn, right? And then it has to be aged in a new charred oak barrel, right? And then I hit it. Only whiskey produced in the United States can be called bourbon. Bourbon cannot have anything added, and I mean nothing.
Right.
You don't add sugars. You don't add, nope,
Right.
not happening. And then it has to be, bourbon must be distilled to no more than 160 proof, barreled at no higher than 125 proof, and bottled at no less than 80 proof.
Right.
That is a big one.
Yeah, and that's a big thing to delineate, because a lot of the times the whiskeys that are out there, people are like, well, isn't Jack Daniel's a bourbon because, it's got similar attributes and everything else. There was a lot of hoopla back in the day because of it being in Tennessee and the whole thing about bourbon originating in Kentucky. It was like a border war kind of thing, right? So yes, some Jack Daniels can be considered bourbons, but they don't put it on their bottling. But there's plenty of Jack Daniels. I mean, that's one of the whiskeys that I started on was Jack Daniels when I was in the military. And then I kind of went to Jim Beam, which Ryan hates most Jim Beam, straight Jim Beam, but he likes certain Jim Beam products like Knob Creek, which is kind of funny.
It's not Jim Beam.
It comes from the same
It
distillery.
doesn't matter that it comes from the same distillery. It's not 7-year Jim Beam. It is not rock gut bottom shelf Jim Beam.
Well, okay, I don't like bottom shelf Jim Beam
That's
either.
That's it.
I will drink Devil's Cut.
You can bring Devil's Cut and I'll drink it with you. But if
Okay.
you bring a bottle of 7-year into the studio, I'm going to ask you to kindly exit stage left.
Stage right and stage right.
Stage left.
Oh, that's even weirder.
Because upstairs, stage left would be out the window.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, just jump
I
out
don't
the
want
window.
you to go back down the stairs. Go
Oh.
out the window with the bottle.
Well,
Yeah.
also, fuck you. Trying to break my leg.
I'm trying to break the bottle.
Yeah. But as far as being considered a bourbon, I do like that the government made some restrictions, because just like most spirits out there, it's good to have, that caveat as to what makes it whatever it is, whatever the spirit is, whether it's a port wine or a Irish whiskey, depending on where it's from in Ireland. It has a whole nother name to it. Whiskey, bourbon. It's just interesting. I do find that interesting. But as far as like newbie stuff, I don't know, man. I would like all this Penelope, right? So MGP is a very big thing, and we have to do a review of that, and you guys stay tuned for that because I was fortunate enough to reach out to MGP, and they blessed us with samples to try out. And we're going to do some blind taste testing of the MGP, so stay tuned for that. Now, we're drinking this Eagle Rare, it's an easy sipper.
100%.
It's not something that, like, you need to work up to.
No, not at all. I mean, if we're talking bourbon for beginners, right? I mean, easy thing to go over is how to taste a bourbon.
Well, that's personal preference again.
I mean, it is a personal preference.
You can drink it out of a rocks glass,
if
a
we want to
Glencairn.
be pinkies out and do it proper, you pour and observe the color, sir.
Well, yeah.
Right.
Oh, we're talking that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what we're talking. So you got that.
Yeah.
With the Eagle Rare, you got
It's very
opinion.
caramely.
It's a very rich amber, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't have a lot of oily. I mean, it's a little oily. You can see it as it like smears on the side of the glass.
Right. So it has a nice little drag till about quarter way down, and then it shoots on down, right? And then your next step, if we're talking prim and proper, would be to nose to the glass. Don't put your nose in the bourbon.
I mean, I do all the
Nose to
time.
the glass, right?
It's kind of weird, but
Give a sniff, right?
give it a sniff.
Breathe through your nose, not with your lips parted, right? Closed mouth, because as you know, what is it? I forgot the percentage, but it's like 80 or 90% of your taste comes from your smell,
Well, yeah,
right?
and that's why when people had COVID and they lost their sense of smell, it was like you lost your sense of taste also.
So that's why they say when you smell, stop yakking, right? So you smell for the notes, right? And then the next is the sip, right? And if we're doing this properly, you hold it in your mouth for a moment, right?
That's what she said.
Make sure that you get it thoroughly around, right? So that you get the full flavor, because you have actually, if I'm not mistaken, Dan, and you may know this better than me, your tongue is broken down into different segments of taste buds.
Oh, you're right.
Right?
100%. You have the bitter, the sweet,
right.
Salty, the savory. It's I think 5 different parts of your tongue.
Right. So that's what I'm getting at. So they want you to hold it in your mouth.
Yeah.
So that it hits all portions of your tongue, so you can get all those flavors, right?
Right.
And then you note the finish, whether it's
short,
medium, long, really burns, really smooth. If it's got that warmth going down, because sometimes we'll drink bourbons that I'll drink a bourbon and I'm just like, yeah, that's not that warm. Like, and
it's
when
almost like you drink water, you know?
Right.
What I mean?
And when I say warm, like I can still have a burn up here in my mouth and not have that wholesome warmth that you get from, like we said, I think I said it last week, like eating a stew, right? It's like
a whiskey hug,
right?
Or
it's
whatever.
a hug, right? It's like a hug for your insides. So you note the finish and then you repeat.
Yeah.
So that's
tasting bourbon is also subjective because people will talk about it being neat versus on ice or on the rocks. And so that's a different taste, and we've been trying to do that for most people, like where we'll do it neat and we'll do it on the rocks, where it does change the profile slightly, as we've noticed on the better bourbons.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't change it that much. But on the ones that are like lower end bourbons that might have a more ethanol kick to it,
Yep.
it brings that ethanol down,
Right.
so it's more tolerable. And so if anybody out there is drinking a bourbon and all, you're like, ooh, that's rough, just go ahead and throw a cube in there. And if that's not enough, put a second cube in there and dilute it a little, or even a splash of like distilled water. You know, you don't really want to put tap water in there because it's just going to add a weird funk. But if you do want merch, you can go to our website at bourbonsauced.com and you will find everything that we typically wear on the show. Not what I'm wearing currently because I'm wearing street clothes.
I mean, I am wearing it. I even undid the one side of. You see here how I'm talking? I even undid the one side of my bib there.
He undid it.
I undid it so you could see the bourbon sauced on the Centra here, right? The Centra.
We have embroidery stuff. We have different things. You can find all of our social media on that page with the little links at the very top. And if you're curious as to what we do on our TikTok or our Instagram or our Facebook, you'll find those links there. They're readily available for you. So,
you know, we're still talking bourbon for beginners, right?
yeah.
What better thing to talk about than charring levels and
Oh, that's too advanced for
char
this.
versus toasting?
Yeah, that's too advanced for this.
You think?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think it's an episode 2.
Well,
So if you guys are curious, we're going to do a series.
I like series. I mean, I got a bad
I'm out of
liver.
bourbon.
I got a bad liver. We've been out of bourbon.
Are you out of bourbon too?
Yeah, we've been out of
You wanna
bourbon.
pour
So,
something weird?
No, we got.
Are you
what?
sure you don't want to pour something weird?
When we say weird, you know what? What else do we got
that's
close?
I think that's on the docket to do later.
It is on the. Yeah,
Fact.
I know what you want to pour.
Yeah.
Why don't we actually? You know what? Let's do this because you
why don't we
already
just
brought it
do
up. Or you already brought it up.
The four
Just for our
roses?
cheers. Yeah, just for our
All right,
cheers.
fine.
All right. And a silence falls over the crowd as he stands up. Is he gonna pull it out correctly? Let's see.
America.
And a roar.
That
We'll
was
see how the cork
solid.
goes back. We'll see how the cork goes back.
That was fucking solid. It sounded so good. That was some EMR shit right there. I was like
I know,
a kiss. Like a kiss.
Right? That was a snuggle hug
That was a
right
good.
there.
It was a good bourbon kiss.
All right, now let's see how it goes back in real quick, and then we'll do our cheers and close this out. Lines up for it, and
Oh, it wasn't too bad.
That's
It was
a
like a
little-
magazine going in a gun.
so basically what
I
we're
had to
saying
go cook
is, if I understood correctly, that and so that the audience understands correctly, the bourbon for beginners is going to become a journey,
Yes.
and it'll progress.
Yes, that's 100% correct. But if you guys like this and you want to see more of the beginner journey, stick with us because we've got more coming. Bourbons and tips and tricks and things. If you would like to see more, please subscribe, like, comment below. Until next time, get sauced, drink your favorite beverage. Cheers.
Cheers.